Are there still?
Well, and like I said, they
All righty. Guys ready? Okay, ready downstairs? I think it's time to get going here. Okay, wow.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Hi. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the town hall. It's great to see so many people in attendance. We have some interesting matters on our agenda tonight, but please join me while we pledge allegiance to our flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, may I have a motion to accept the minutes of the April 23rd meeting?
Make a motion?
Second?
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so as I said, we have a number of items on our agenda, and the most exciting one is a workshop presented by Delaware Engineering. But first, we have a couple of items, public comment on the resolutions only. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes and state your name and address. And again, it would be on any of the resolutions before us. There will be a separate public hearing on Local Law B, which is also on the agenda. And then at the conclusion of the meeting, we will have a public comment on any town-related business item. So if you have a comment on any of the resolutions, please join us at the podium. Okay, great. Everybody's here just to watch. Woo! All right, so then what we'll do is we'll move on to the public hearing on Local Law B. And Madam Clerk, would you please read the hearing notice?
Please take notice that the Hyde Park Town Board shall hold a public hearing on the adoption of Local Law B of 2018, entitled A Local Law Changing the Meeting Date of the Town of Hyde Park Board of Assessment Review on May 7th, 2018 at 7:05 p.m. in the evening of that date at the Hyde Park Town Hall, located at 4383 Albany Post Road, Hyde Park, New York. The purpose of the local law is to change the assessment day for the meeting of the Board of Assessment Review of the Town of Hyde Park from the 4th Tuesday in May to the 2nd Wednesday following the 4th Tuesday in May, commencing immediately in each year thereafter. All persons desiring to speak at said public hearing will be provided with an opportunity to do so. A copy of the local law shall be posted on the town's website and will be available for inspection at the office of the town clerk during normal business hours. Any person desiring to be heard on the adoption of said local law shall be given an opportunity to do so at the public hearing. By order of the Town Board of the Town of Hyde Park, dated April 24th, 2018, Hyde Park, New York, Donna McGrogan, Town Clerk.
Okay, so as I said, please come on up to the podium if you have public comment regarding Local Law B. Limit your comments to 3 minutes and state your name and address. And just to really give everyone a little background on Local Law B, we had an assessor who resigned recently and has taken a job elsewhere. And so what we have done is hired an acting assessor for the next 3 months. And because he's an assessor in another community, the day of the grievance day conflicted with the grievance day that we had. So we are able to change that date via local law. And so that is for this year. You know, we're still working on a long-term solution on the assessor issue. They're actually in very short supply. So if there's college grads out there looking for a new career, I would suggest assessment. Is really it's an interesting field that there's just not enough people in that area. So what we're doing, as I said, is we have a temporary solution because it was absolutely necessary that we do that. And we're working on a more permanent. So please join me at please go to the podium and provide your comment if you have one on this change.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Good evening, Madam Supervisor and Town Board members. My name is Bob Clearwater. I live at 9 Nicholas Lane in Statsburg, New York. I have been a volunteer member of the Hyde Park Board of Assessment Review for approximately 9 years. Excuse me. Additionally, I have served the people of Hyde Park as an elected town councilman for 4 years and as a Dutchess County legislator for 4 years. But it goes deeper than that. My father served Hyde Park as an elected official. My wife told me not to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. My father served this town for 20 years as an elected official, and my wife served this town as an elected official and now serves this town as a volunteer as the Ethics Committee chairman. So we have been involved in Hyde Park since 1951. When I saw this happen, things do happen. I understand that you folks are in an issue. But I know that this public comment is not the time for debate between the town board and the public. I understand that because I've sat where you are sitting right now. However, my opening question is, 2018 becomes history, or when it becomes history, what will the date for the future assessment grievance days in the town of Hyde Park be? Because if it goes back to where they are, I don't have a problem with this law. And I know you have to adopt a law that will go well into the future. I understand that. But I just don't want it to be every year from this day forward. If it happens to be, in whatever. Will the date be directed by the state of New York or an alternate date established by the town board of the town of Hyde Park? I understand the issues that recently developed. Additionally, I feel that the direction of this town board is taking the resolve of the 2018 grievance day and commendable and necessary. It was my original understanding when the town Hyde Park reached out to me and all of the Board of Assessment Review members that their date modification was for this year only because it was mandatory to secure a temporary assessor for 2018. My issues are extension of changing the ongoing grievance day to the second Wednesday after the fourth Tuesday. This disrupts my Memorial Day weekend and every volunteer that serves on the Board of Assessment Review. I trust that this local law will only affect 2018 grievance date, however, be in place if this scenario should surface again in the future. Thank you for your patience and your understanding.
Okay. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on local law B? Okay, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Make a motion?
And a second?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Warren, would you like to address that?
Sure. The reason the local law is cast in terms of in perpetuity is because that's the way the local law has to be drafted. It's our intention to, next year, hopefully when we have a full-time assessor, we will pass a local law changing it back to the fourth Tuesday. So don't worry about that.
Okay, well, great. So the next item on our agenda is the workshop by Delaware Engineering, and it's a presentation on the planning and engineering report for the Hyde Park Town Center revitalization project. So, just to give everyone some background, we have members of our steering committee over here to the left who have worked diligently with the engineering consultants over the last, I don't know, what was it, a year and a half or so? About that, and developing the draft of these engineering documents that really address a lot of what we're trying to create here in the town center. As many people know, we have something called the Downtown Initiative, and it's really designed to create a more vibrant pedestrian district in our town along the area of Route 9, essentially from the Pinewoods light to an area a little bit south, well, really in the proximity of Rogers Place, but yet there are recommendations that are coming out of this study and report that exceed that area. And we have wonderful consultants that have brought their tremendous experience and expertise and knowledge to Hyde Park by by the virtue of an RFP response, and it's just really been a pleasure to work with Delaware Engineering. And I want to commend the steering committee who, again, they came to meetings, they studied materials, they made recommendations, and also to commend the public who participated in our workshops that we held right here in Town Hall and gave us input that really figured into these very valuable documents that will form the basis of our future actions. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Delaware Engineering, and Mary Beth, please carry on.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Mary Beth Bianconi. I'm a partner with Delaware Engineering. At the table is another partner, Brock Jusela. I almost didn't get there. And Elizabeth Horvath, who is our senior project manager for this project. Brock, you want to make us go forward here? So tonight we're here, as the supervisor said, to summarize the work that's been going on for the past approximately 18 months. This work was funded by a grant that the town received from the New York State Energy and Research Development Authority, NYSERDA. It was a $161,000 grant that paid for town administration and the efforts that have put together to date a draft report that covers a variety of different topics that we're going to discuss this evening. Our purpose in being here tonight, we're going to go through how we've gotten here, including discussing what the project is about, our input that we had from our stakeholders and the public, the conceptual redevelopment plan for this area of the town center, zoning code analysis, Route 9 improvements, and last but certainly not least, a public sewer system. Brock, you want to move us forward? So, but first, as the supervisor alluded to, we need to thank a number of people, and one is obviously NYSERDA for the funding, but in addition to that, the steering committee. And it's important to recognize that they attended 10 meetings spanning 18 months. All those meetings were during the daytime. They were about 2 hours long. They were very intense meetings, and the committee did a lot of homework and a lot of work to get those meetings to be valuable and provide a lot of input. In addition, there were a number of members of the community in terms of local business owners, real estate folks, engineers, planners, people from DOT who work in the area, town officials, staff of the town. It was a very large group of folks who contributed to this, and so we owe them a great deal of thanks for their efforts. And we have a number of steering committee members who are represented here tonight, and we're happy to have them. So, let's see, keep going, Brock. Okay, overview and goals. So this is what this is. So next. So, you know, this will not surprise anyone. We've been over this before. The center of the community needs some revitalization. That seems to be something that everyone agrees with. We need the goal, the objective, things that we heard from folks would be to create a vibrant, pedestrian-friendly, mixed-use neighborhood in the center of the community. We'll need infrastructure in order to support that, incentivize that type of development, and at the end of the day, the concept is to boost the tax base and increase the quality of life for folks here in the community. So, the study area is shown here in our little red box. McDonald's is right in the middle. So if that helps orient folks, north is towards me, south is away from me. This is the area that was defined in the grant, so this is the area that was focused, the focus of the Route 9 improvements and the zoning evaluation. The sewer discussion is actually a larger area, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But the challenges of this area are fairly significant. Lack of sewer, that's the number one thing that the property owners identified, and the number one thing that's been historically identified as reducing the investment potential of this area. The streetscape is very auto-oriented. It's not particularly inviting. It's not the most pedestrian-friendly. It's not really a neighborhood. It's sort of a loosely knit together area of retail, and so the concept would be to make that more integrated. And one of the questions is what can be done from a land use perspective to make that vision come to fruition. So with that, I'm going to actually turn this over to Elizabeth Horvath. She's going to discuss our next few topics.
Thank you all. So, stakeholder input. Brock, could you go to the next slide? We wanted this, and the town in particular wanted this to be a really community-led effort. So throughout the process, we made sure that your voices were heard. Some of you have been to more than one of these public meetings talking about what the visions and the goals of this project could be. The most recent one that we had was in October of 2017, where we presented our initial findings. We had dozens of you. This room was filled to capacity. We got a lot of comments and a lot of great questions and a lot of feedback that we were then able to incorporate into the plan. In addition to that, as some of you will remember, there was an online survey that I think about 100 people took. In addition to that, we did a lot of stakeholder interviews one-on-one with people throughout the community, and as Mary Beth had said, from a lot of different, wearing a lot of different hats in the community, whether it was real estate agents or property owners or the public in general, whether it's people with small children or people who are older who are looking to age in place. We gathered information through the interviews, through the surveys, through the public information meetings, so that we could pull together what would be a vision that the community is interested in, that the community is excited about, and that the community could support. So as Mary Beth mentioned, tonight's meeting is the culmination of more than a year's worth of effort. And let us tell you what we heard. And some of this will be familiar to those of you who have been to many of these meetings now. We heard a lot about pedestrian friendly. Everybody's interested these days in walkable neighborhoods. The suburban style of development where houses are off on their own, taking up a lot of land, and there's not very much community connection, that's just not interesting anymore. What retirees want, what young families want, what millennials want is a dense, mixed-use neighborhood where you can walk and you can be surrounded by all of life. We heard a lot about an interest in public green community space, maybe a small village center that surrounds an open green that could then be used for community events, concerts, just recreation, community coming together. So again, creating that neighborhood that now just is a sea of asphalt. We heard a lot about a mix of uses. People want to see in that neighborhood a mix of housing and hospitality and retail and civic purposes, like maybe the library could move there, and restaurants, of course. Restaurants being limited right now by lack of public sewer, but more on that in a moment. There was a lot of talk about amenities for residents and tourists, so recognizing the fact that there are literally tens of thousands of people driving by the town of Hyde Park every year and not necessarily stopping because you don't have this to offer them, but also amenities for the residents. Like I said, the library, the public space, housing that's right in the town center, access to public transportation through a trolley system. So a lot of ways to build together for the residents and the visitors. Could you go to the next slide? Now, what does all of this look like? We can't show you what the vision would be. Well, we can show you examples of what the vision would be. We can't show you what this will look like in the end. But what you have on this slide is a number of different illustrations of real-life communities that have what the vision of Hyde Park is aiming towards. You have walkable downtowns with plenty of amenities. You have residential mixed in with commercial, mixed in with retail and hospitality. You have inviting open spaces that are vibrant, that are filled with people. These are neighborhoods that are called, in the planning community, activated. Could you go to the next slide? Some of these amenities will need parking. This is not your father's parking garage. I think when we talk about what kind of parking might be needed, whether it's needed by the development or legislated by the zoning code, the initial image that many of us have of a parking garage is pretty negative. It's pretty ugly and pretty much of an eyesore. But that's not how these look these days in other communities. You can see here in Michigan, you've got a parking garage hidden in the midst of a mixed-use, very attractive building. In Virginia, you would hardly know that that's a parking garage. It looks like a beautiful historic building. And a number of communities are doing what New Jersey has done in this example, where the parking garage is encased in a building that has other uses. So in some cases, you might see apartments like you do here. In some cases, you might see very attractive retail on the first floor, and the rest of the parking garage is basically shielded. So when you see in the next slide an image of where the parking garage footprint is, keep in mind that it's going to be, in all likelihood, mixed use, and it's going to be attractive. It's not going to be a nightmare. So let's get to that. This is the conceptual redevelopment plan. Many of you have seen this before. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Now, will the town center neighborhood ultimately look like this? No. This is a vision. This is a cartoon right now. This is an illustration of what could happen, prioritizing what you told us was important. So again, we have public space that is green and welcoming, where you've got a mix of retail as well as residential on the second floor. We have parking spaces here and there on the ground, but they're hidden behind trees. And then we have the potential for a larger building that could be, it could be a hotel, it could be condos, it could be some sort of mixed use and parking garage. Again, the goal here was to try to maximize what you all saw as your vision for the community. It's not going to look just like this, and it's not going to happen quickly. There are a lot of things that need to take place before this vision can really be built out. More on that in a moment. So in order to get to that development, one of the first questions that we had to ask ourselves is, will the zoning ordinance in the town of Hyde Park support this? Could you go to the next one? Zoning code analysis. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, and I think you all will be grateful for that. The first question that we had to ask ourselves is, does the current zoning ordinance support the kind of development that we're talking about in the town center? And we looked at a lot of different factors: density, types of land use allowed, building heights, setbacks, and so on. The answer is it's kind of a mixed bag. You don't have maximum setbacks, but you do have a limited height of buildings. Land use law is kind of peculiar here. There's something called by rights uses, where you, as somebody proposing a development, can go into the town and say, I'd like to do this, and if you're doing that, you're permitted without having to go to the planning board and all the site plan review and months and months and months. There are two by rights uses allowed in the town center district. One is solar power and the other is forestry. So you can see that if you're doing anything other than those two kind of unlikely things there, you're going to spend a lot of time in front of the planning board. Is there a path to project approvals? Yes and no. The planning board is obviously a really hard-working group of individuals, but they have some obstacles in front of them. There are aspects of the land use law that aren't precisely written. There might be architectural details that are referenced but not illustrated, and you might find that there are sometimes conflicting documents for guidance. So the zoning ordinance might indicate that you, as a planning board member, need to look at the comprehensive plan, as well as the Greenway, the Hudson Greenway. Sometimes those documents are not in concert, so you as a developer or you as a planning board member are left guessing. Is a zoning change required? Yes. More on that in a moment. Do other town planning documents support the vision? The good news there is yes, the comprehensive plan very much supports pretty much exactly the kind of vision that we're looking at. As far as a zoning change goes, there are a lot of different options that we looked at, from the very time-consuming and expensive to not so much. At the maximum, and this is probably something that you'll want to think about doing sooner rather than much later, is you could completely revise your comprehensive plan, which now that I think it was created in 2007, as it's getting older, and a lot of planners will recommend that you look at that at least every 10 years. But you could go to the lengths of reevaluating your comprehensive plan, updating it, and going through your entire zoning ordinance. That's really time-consuming and it's expensive. There are a lot of other options, but if you go to the next slide, you'll see our recommendation, which is to take the Crossroads Core District, extend it down to the town center, rename it, adjust some of the language, and have essentially two different potential redevelopment areas, up at the Crossroads Core and down in the town center. A lot of benefits here. One, you all as a community are familiar with the Crossroads Core District. You all created it in 2014. It's very recent, so there's something to be said for having the collective mind of the public already centered on this. It's current, it's new. This particular district brings a lot of certainty to developers because there is a lot within that district that's very well outlined, architectural standards, process forward. It allows flexibility within reason. And if you go with this Crossroads Core extension, you have the advantage of speed. This is something that you as a community can accomplish quickly, and there's a minimal cost. That is zoning. Related to this entire project, on the next slide, are Route 9 improvements. If you could go to the next slide. We had a number of goals that we sought out to accomplish as we looked at Route 9 and how changes in Route 9 could help develop the town center to the vision that the community has. So pedestrian-friendly, walkable, bikeable, and so on. We wanted the changes that we make to the structure of Route 9 to help create a sense of place at the town center, to slow traffic, to incorporate complete streets, so streets that are equally available to pedestrians and cyclists and motorized vehicles, calm traffic, as I said, and enhance safety. If you could go to the next slide, and this is where I'll leave you. We have an entire report created by traffic engineers as to the Route 9 improvements that are envisioned and suggested and recommended. It's everything from the addition of more crosswalks and street markings to adjusting the lanes so that you have what you call sharrows, lanes that are shared by bikes and cars, so that there is ultimately, one of the big goals of a NYSERDA grant is to reduce vehicle miles traveled, reduce the negative impact on the environment. So a lot of what you'll see in the Route 9 improvements suggested are activities and processes that can help slow traffic, mitigate traffic, decrease traffic, increase public transportation. We've also noticed that there are not a lot of pedestrian amenities along Route 9, so the idea of adding benches, pedestrian level street lighting to create sort of a canopy of light over the streets, and improved signals. And again, this is an entire 50-page study on its own, but I'm going to leave it at that because I know that a lot of you are most curious about what Brock is going to speak about next, which is how do we spur all of this development and do so with public sewer?
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was a great recap.
So what was noted right at the beginning, one of the main challenges of this town center revitalization work is the lack of public sewer. The area where the town center is located is generally got very high bedrock. As the on-site systems, the idea normally is the water would then percolate into the ground where it gets treated. Water does not percolate into bedrock, therefore limiting the ability to do a lot of things in that area. So we looked at recognizing that we needed sewers within the town center. There was also recognition that the idea behind the town center was to revitalize the entirety of the town. So we looked at not only limiting ourselves to the town center sewer district, but we expanded it as well. So we looked at 3 options. The first option was to do a sewer district that encompassed solely the town center, which was all on the east side of Route 9, south of Pinewood Road. So that was the first option. Go to the next slide. The second option was to create a commercial sewer district. So this option would create public sewers that would enhance the commercial corridor coming from Linden Lane all the way down to Terwilliger Road. And there had been some interest of some other folks. Yeah, that might be helpful. So through the public comment, there had been some interest of some folks outside of this main corridor, this 2A that we're showing, to do some of these commercial areas, to pick up some of these commercial areas down across from the FDR site. And then there was also some interest from the FDR site as well as the Vanderbilt Mansion to connect those as well. So we looked at a main corridor option, then we picked up these other options as alternates, so there was a concept of what that pricing would be to do so. Next slide. So then we took the commercial corridor concept and expanded it out to pick up a lot of the residential areas in the more dense areas, most of it on the west side of Route 9. And so we looked at that option, and again with that option, we maintained the ability to then bump in these farther out areas should that be something the town would choose to do. Next slide. So we took all that, we mixed it up into a bag and said, all right, how are we going to compare these? So we looked at these options looked at the options and compared them for which provide the density, which provide for growth. Growth is one of the important things when it comes to this revitalization again, which enhances the tax base, which provides the best environmental benefits, which provides the most longevity and sustainability. The key components that we used in our evaluation was density. The denser your population is for a sewer district, the more users there are to pay the fixed costs that go into that. Longevity was important. That kind of follows the density side of the equation, where if you have this big, beautiful wastewater plant, well, those cost money to operate. The more people that you have paying in towards that, the better that's going to be maintained, and the more longevity you're going to get out of that. Environmental benefit was a very important one as well. As I had mentioned, that area where the town center is now, high bedrock, poorly performing sewer systems in that area. So we compared them all, and what we found was the town center, just the alternate one, which was just the town center, really was not feasible. It was quite expensive for the number of users that you potentially have. The alternates 2 and 3, alternate 3 provided the most density from just purely a technical standpoint, worked well. Alternate 2 works very well as well, and those adders that we had in there are also feasible. So this is something where the town has decisions to make as to whether they want to go alternate 2, alternate 3, and how those pieces fit together. But from a technical standpoint, they all work. And that's it.
Thanks, Brock. Thank you.
I'm not going to point. I'm going to run out of things to point. Can you go to the next one? So this is a timeline for the sewers, and so I just want to add a couple things to this. No decisions have been made about the sewer system at all, period. I'm going to say it again. No decisions have been made about a sewer system at all. This is always, we've done a lot of these. This is actually a fairly popular thing for us to do these days. We have a lot of communities where you're a little unique. We have a lot of places where there's, say, a hamlet or a village that has public infrastructure. Over the course of suburbanization, post-World War II, we have, the roads that go out from it that became developed that were on septic systems. And now maybe they spawned another hamlet, and that hamlet is dying because it doesn't have sewer service. So we've actually done a number of these projects where we've looked at how do we sewer an area that has a lot of potential, but also has some constraints. And in our experience, this is an iterative process. There are multiple parts to it. One of them is technical. Brock's an engineer. He does a lot of, math and calculations and all kinds of good stuff, and says this works and this doesn't. And so from that, we now have sort of the baseline, because this is what's technically feasible, what can be permitted from a regulatory perspective. We also look and say, from a money perspective, what can work. We look at that. We try to be very conservative. We don't assume that there's going to be grants falling from the sky, because they may not happen. We try to look at this very realistically. We try to take into consideration the fact that we know utilities are expensive. Nobody likes to pay their utility bills, but at the end of the day, if you're going to have one of these kinds of systems, it has a cost. So we take that into consideration. Then we're kind of sidelined a little bit, and the rest of the considerations really come from you and from the town board in terms of what makes sense. Does it make sense to have a sewer system that covers any geography? Pick one, it doesn't matter, any geography. That really comes from you and from your community. It comes from a lot of considerations. We have a commercial area here. We're kind of fortunate that we have an area that really is a commercial area, and commercial property owners have a different perspective on things like utilities. In many cases, we interviewed a lot of people along that corridor who said, when can it come? It cannot come soon enough, because they're already dealing with the costs and challenges of having septic systems, the brewery and restaurants and other folks. It's expensive, and it's also a risk from a business perspective. So they have one perspective. Residents have another perspective. A lot of people, flush and forget. my septic system works great. I don't see a reason for this, and I don't want to pay for it. Okay, that's definitely a perspective. We talked to other folks who said, I've had people in to work on my septic system 3 times in the last 10 years. It's already cost me $30,000, $40,000. Please, I'd rather pay for a public sewer system. Again, lots of different perspectives, but I just want to say that this is a long process. It will not sneak up on you if you're paying attention. It takes a while, and that's this timeline. You'll see it starts in the summer of 2018 and extends all the way to 2021, which is not exactly tomorrow. So what happens next? So next in this process, there certainly has been enough interest for the town to consider advancing the next preliminary steps in looking at forming a sewer district and looking at a sewer system for the community. To that end, the town went and got a grant from Dutchess County to actually fund the exploration of that. So one of the things that I want to take a second to say is, in a lot of communities when we do these processes, they take a lot longer to do because the town board has not been as proactive in going out and finding funding. They have to look in their budget and say, where's the money going to come from to pay for this, because it all costs money. Here, the town of Hyde Park has been incredibly proactive in going and securing funds, $161,000 to do this plan in the first place, another, I think it's $75,000 to advance the district. The good news is, whether you live in this potential sewer district or not, you're not paying for all these activities because the town was proactive and went and got grant funds to support that. So that's a good thing. So our next step is to create something called a map plan and report. And that comes out of the statute that New York State has that says when you're creating a sewer district, you have to say who, what, where, when, and why. It's kind of nice. It's a nice little report. Brock has a big, fat engineering report with all kinds of good calculations and things in that. That's not what a map plan and report is. It literally is a description of a taxing jurisdiction. That's what a sewer district is. It's a taxing jurisdiction. Altogetherly important in that is an identification of user costs. That number we don't really have right now because there is, again, we're back to a couple of different aspects of that. There's the math and the sort of science side of it, but there's the public policy side of it as well. So that creation of the map plan and report will be an action that will be happening with a technical portion, but also with input from the board and the public as well. Scope and scale of the project and costs are identified. That report is subject to public review and public hearing at a minimum. There are other steps in the process for public input, and there's also environmental review for this. On balance, our experience from an environmental perspective is that installing a public sewer system, while it will have temporary impacts in terms of construction, the long-term impacts are positive on the environment. Our plan would be, moving forward, since the town has a grant in hand, would be to conduct that process over the summer of this year to move forward. One of the things that will happen with this project, if it advances, and remember, no decisions have been made and no one has said anything is going to happen, but if it advances, this project will be reviewed by the Office of the State Comptroller. That is sort of a belts and suspenders approach to evaluating potential tax issues. And so that's a process that takes a number of months, would happen in the fall of 2018. And then finally, if the process moves forward, a district would be created in late 2018. So, that's 6 months from now, 7, 8 months from now, something like that. And then it takes a while to design something like this. This project would be large enough that certainly that would be subject to public bidding requirements. It's subject to environmental review. There are a lot of approvals that would be required. So that process is at least a year. So we've sort of stuck 2019 in there for that process. And then construction is probably a 2-year process for a project of this scale. So that just kind of gives you an idea. This is, again, as Elizabeth said, even with the redevelopment of the town center, this is not something that happens overnight. It's a long process. But the town board has done a wonderful job and the public has done a wonderful job so far inputting to the process and kind of getting to the point where you have something that you can talk about. No decisions have been made, but to have something you can consider, and you're to be commended for that. Over the years, there have been many attempts to look at a sewer system in this area of the community that for one reason or another have not advanced through the process. And my sense is that this process has been a very open and engaging process, and for that reason, it's advanced further than maybe some others in the past. So Brock, do you want to go to the next one? So, gathering steam as well as funding. We talked a minute ago about some of the efforts the town has made to secure funds for the engineering and legal side of the work. But in addition to that, the town board very proactively, all of those things combined and dollars committed for towards construction if a sewer system is to be constructed, we're at $5.25 million in grants. It's free money, doesn't have to be paid back.
That's just for construction.
That's just for construction.
Yep.
That's just for construction. That's astounding. I've been doing this for a really long time. I'm in my 27th year of doing this. This is the first time ever that I've ever had a group that's gotten this far ahead of it. Excellent. Absolutely excellent. In addition to that, the town has been incredibly proactive with something called TAP, which is a program that the state runs, the Department of Transportation runs for the implementation of multimodal things, which basically more than one way of getting around, in terms of sidewalks. And so there's sidewalks that are going to be installed from Park Plaza to the firehouse, and pedestrian improvements that go along with that. In addition to that, the town has a grant to install sidewalks along to Pinewood Park, so from 9 up to Pinewoods Park. Lighting from Calmer to Park Plaza. There's new businesses, there's new development coming in, so there's a lot of momentum to keep moving forward. And this concludes our part of this discussion. I think we're going to open it up for some questions, some comments. Sure, absolutely.
While you were talking. I just wanted to, first of all, recognize we have a few planning board members here tonight. Brent, Ann, Diane, Tori, I don't know if I missed anyone. But I just wanted to thank them also for being part of this. We kind of purposely insulated the planning board a little bit from this process because there are a number of projects being developed right now in this project area. And so we didn't want the planning board to be sort of pulled in two different directions. So, but it's been great to have them be part of the public meetings and have their input. And yeah, just to clarify, as people obviously are aware, there is construction going on in some of the area that we're going through this planning process for. And that's good because it's going to take a while before we get a sewer in place. But we have been happy to have a number of the property owners as part of the steering committee and really thinking about the future and how those properties could be used more intensively once the infrastructure does come online. So I just wanted to clarify that if you think, well, why are they building something that's different than that's why, because people got to do what they got to do, and the town will keep growing as time goes on. And I also just wanted to point out that as Mary Beth mentioned, we got a grant for this project from NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, and they were a little complicated to work with at the outset of it. But as we got towards the end here and they saw what the results were and they saw what funding we were able to generate and what public support, they've gotten really excited about this, and they want to use this project as a model for other places throughout the state, which is really nice to see that that Hyde Park can be a bit of a trailblazer in that respect. And it's also being featured at a PACE Land Use Law Center program this Friday. And so it's it's a nice model of using both planning and infrastructure to incentivize redevelopment in the town center. A lot of times people just like to do the planning part, but if you don't have the infrastructure, it's not going to happen. So thank you so much for your amazing work on this.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, Delaware has been amazing to work with. You can see the command you have of all the tentacles that are involved in this project, and I know that we have the right people to lead us forward through this next public phase. And so I know Mary Beth made it absolutely clear, but I can't help but just want to reiterate that, in fact, this is the beginning of the process, and we're so glad that people are here, and that we hope that you will continue to come to give us your feedback. We have, as Mary Beth alluded to, a lot of compiled the grants, a lot of grant funding to move ahead on the project, but it really is a moment in time for the town. We have grant funding in place. We actually have a viable plan. We have interested populace, and we have viable projects. So sewer is never going to be cheaper, and that's one thing that we've learned, that these capital projects, they get more expensive, not less. So we're really excited about this, and I'm a little nervous about the work ahead, and that we can really pull together at this moment in time and move forward. So, you know, we have another TAP project, as Mary Beth alluded to, which I'm meeting with the engineers this week. We have Pete here who's doing the sidewalks up to PINEWOODS. So I think that I can tell by the number of calls that I receive at the supervisor's office that there's definitely an uptick in the interest in commercial real estate, and that's really good for our town. We have a compounding pharmacy that's going in one of the empty buildings, and that's also kind of a cool investment, and really a good use for a large building that maybe is kind of obsolete in many ways. We have the Saki Manufacturing Company that I think they're submitting. Have they submitted as of yet, or close? They're close, keeping our fingers crossed. But you know, so they're moving ahead, and you know, the Mavis, their investment, though Emily said it's not exactly reflective of the concept plan that came forward, it's really a shaping process, and seeing this type of investment in our town is really going to spur additional investment. And so we're thrilled. We hope that people continue to come. As I said, you know, the sewer will, the map plan and report process has a number of public hearings that will be part of it, as will the zoning improvements and the pedestrian improvements.
And in particular, we're going to be looking for input from the public as to whether to go with that, to explore that option
Yes.
3 that would include the residential neighborhoods. You know, that wasn't really something that we had thought of at the outset, and Mary Beth and Brock said, you know, you got to look at it because, first of all, it brings a lot more customers in, and second, you know, you just don't want people afterwards to say, well, can't you have a sewer now? Why can't we hook up to it? We need to explore that up front, because if it's designed not to include the residential neighborhoods, you can't really add them in later. So we're not going to, you know, push that on anyone, but we want to find out if that's what the public wants or not. Now's the time to make that decision.
And speaking to that, we are going to take a look at our calendar, and thinking a meeting in June, a Monday night when we don't have our traditional meeting, where we'll invite the public who would be part of this district to come to the town hall and really engage and try to understand whether it's of value to them and to their homes and to their investments. So, so with that, does the town board have anything that they would like to add, or any questions? No? Or-
It's great.
or how about the steering committee? You guys covered it all. Okay, so then I'd like to do is open it up to the public, and please, you know, join us at the podium. I would appreciate it if people do keep their comments to 3 minutes. It just because we do have a lot of people in the room, and it's just kind of keeps the dialogue flowing.
Good evening, excuse me, Madam Supervisor, for the second time on town board. Now, I'm honored to have Bob Linville, who may remember this, I'm not positive. And I didn't hear dollars mentioned, other than the fact that we're in for a $5.25 million grant, which I think is phenomenal. When I was on the town board back in the late 90s, we had explored the sewer. And I think Pete was involved with it, with Morris Associates. Dan Wheeler was involved with it, with, I'm not sure what Dan's name of his company was. Then I moved on to the county legislature, and there was 2 fellows called Gagne Baker who bought the St. Andrews property. And they were going to donate $10 million for a sewer plant at the top of Teller Hill, because it was going to cost, in those days, $10 million or $11 million, I don't remember the exact figure, to get the lines from Vanderbilt's down to the top of Teller Hill. So that was an $11 million project, $10 or $11 million project, and Baker Gagne was going to absorb the next $10 million to process it. There was also, at that time, town of Poughkeepsie had vacant sewer or usage in their plan down in town of Poughkeepsie. then Hyde Park, or the Hudson River State Hospital got sold, and that kind of like was eliminated because they said, we probably will need it. So anyway, in those days, it was going to cost $22 million to get the sewer from Vanderbilt down to top of Tower Hill. And Baker Gagne was going to kick in 10 million or 11 million, whatever, for the processing plant. Now, in those days, I was a union electrician. I was making $12.50 an hour. The prevailing rate today for a union electrician is about $51 or $52 an hour, considerably more than it was when I was working in the trades. So that $20 million price tag of 20 years ago, I don't know what it is. And I didn't hear costs mentioned tonight. Now, I don't know why they're not mentioning costs. Maybe they haven't developed them yet. But if it was $20 million 20 years ago, it's got to be $50 million today.
Well, we do have some costs identified, and they are not benefit units as of this time, but projected costs of 17 million. About, Mary Beth, do you want to speak?
Yeah,
to
you know, the costs surprisingly are not super different. We're looking anywhere from 17 to about 24 million, depending on which option. And that doesn't include going out to the hinterland. So it doesn't include getting to the Vanderbilt, and it doesn't include getting to at the FDR site, because those would be by contract service. So that would be something that they would pay for, not you.
Well, we don't pay for it because it's all part of the benefit assessment.
Well, nevertheless, it wouldn't be part of the numbers that we're talking about. It would be in addition to, because those entities would have to pay that cost themselves. So we're still in that same price range. It has changed, but mostly because the shape of the project changed over that time period. That was about 10 years ago. If I recall correctly, it was 2007, 2006, 2007, something like that. One thing to note is that while the Baker Gagne St. Andrews Village project is gone, you have the Bellafield project. And Bellafield is providing funding to the town to the tune of
$1.25 million.
$1.25 million.
Not a lot of money.
But one of the things to know is that this is a process of 1,000 cuts. The $5.25 million that's been accumulated to date is great money. One of the things that will happen as we go forward is you'll see that additional grants will be needed to make this an affordable project, and the cost of borrowing will be critical. There will not be an opportunity for this project to be 100% paid for by grants. We work in a lot of communities that are very, 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 very income challenged, and even in those communities it's very difficult to have no borrowing. But one of the objectives of this project would be to capture low interest borrowing to the extent that it could be. If you're watching the news, you're seeing that interest rates are going up. As the supervisor said, projects don't get cheaper. You mentioned labor does not get cheaper. Commodities do not get cheaper. So this is one of those situations where, you know, if it's not, I can tell you one thing, it's not going to be inexpensive. It's going to be expensive. A couple of other things to know. The average cost of sewer in a town sewer district in 2018 in New York State is just under $1,000 a year. That's the average cost. That's published by the New York State Office of the Comptroller. What they do is they take 3 years worth of data of every town, just like the town of Hyde Park, who is advancing a project. They figure out what is that average cost to a household in those communities. They add them all up and divide, and they come up with a number. It's $966 a year.
So that doesn't include the benefit assessment or the paying off the bond rating?
That's the cost. That's
It
the
doesn't pay off the bond?
O&M and debt.
Okay, because when I was on the town
the state.
board, I checked with 2 local restaurant people, and I'm sure you know them all. And at that time, back in 97, 98, it was going to cost these 2 restaurant people $22,000 a year to pay off the benefit assessment. That didn't include their usage of the sewer. So did it get cheaper? I doubt it. Thank you.
Right, and that's understood. And again, we haven't gotten to that point yet. That map plan and report is the part where you get to those, you know, what is the cost going to be to the user, but we haven't gotten that far. Brock has done detailed construction cost estimates. What would it cost to build a system like this? That information is, again, as we said, it's in that range. It's not penny change by any stretch. It's 17 to about 24 million, depending on the option. That's not the kind of money we all talk about over coffee every morning. by a long shot. So again, the objective of this project is to see, no one's made any decisions yet, but is to see, can we get a project that is financially doable, and what does that look like? One of the things you may remember from when Brock was talking earlier, we looked at 3 options. We actually probably looked at 23 options is the reality. We boiled it down to 3 options at the end of the day, but we looked at a lot of different options. And what we were looking for is a number of things. Density is key. The more people you have to pay for the stuff, the better off you are, the more things you have to pay, because the cost of pipe does not matter if there's 1,000 people's water flowing through it or 10. It's still the same cost of the pipe. The treatment options. We kind of didn't really talk a lot about this, but so there's 2 parts to a sewer system. There's the pipes that get the water conveyed from point A to point B, and then there's something that treats that water and turns it into something that's safe to discharge to the environment. So that treatment part of it is another chunk of the cost. And when we looked at sewering just the small neighborhood, which has been looked at many different times in many different ways, what ends up happening is that those costs, because of environmental requirements, because the pipe costs what it costs, no matter whether there's 10 or 100, are so high that that's not feasible. So we start saying, well, what makes this, because we look at this from an engineering perspective, and we say, what makes this feasible? And there's a possibility, as Emily was saying, we have a map up there that shows a lot of stuff. That might be engineering feasible, and it might even be cost feasible, but it might be feasible. The public might say no. That's okay. That's all right. That's this process. But when we look at those combinations of things, we're looking at how do we get enough density to support the cost, both of building it, paying off the long-term debt, and operating and maintaining it, whatever it is. We also look at having, this question came up at one of the other public meetings was, isn't a smaller system more sustainable than a bigger one? The answer is no. Actually, a larger system is substantially more sustainable than a small one. A small one relies very, very heavily on very few people to pay the costs. And say somebody, decides to move to Georgia. There goes a user to pay those costs. And the costs don't care, we're back to they don't care once you've built something, whether there's 1 or 100, the costs still have to be paid. So larger systems are more sustainable, more diverse systems are more sustainable. So ones that aren't entirely relying on one kind of land use, we're back to the sort of one-horse town, you can sort of think of examples of that. So we're looking at it from a what makes this sustainable. We have very detailed costs at this point, as much as we can know. Now, we haven't gone out, you might have noticed. Nobody's been out there surveying stuff. No one's been out there taking soil borings. We haven't done the cultural resources studies and all that yet. That would be part of the next step in this. But we do a lot of these, and these costs that we're looking at are pretty reasonable from what we've seen in other places. So we'll get there. We'd like to sort of beg you to stay tuned. But know that this is not a $50 million project. No one's talking about anything like that. And that there are a lot of aspects to this. Right now, as it sits, with the $5.25 million in grant, more money is needed. We need a lower interest rate. We need to work towards that, and we need to work towards more grants to make this sustainable. And that's just truth, is what it is. But that's part of this process. And that's why we go through this process, why you're all sitting here to listen to this. That's why there's next steps in the process and why the town has gone and gotten funding to support that. So I hope that kind of answers the question for now, knowing that there's more to come.
Mary Beth, that's a thank you for giving that very complete answer. And I really like the concept of sustainability because what we're talking about is future. We're not really looking back. I mean, Hyde Park has spent a lot of time looking backwards. We're a historic community, blah, blah, blah. But now it's really time to look forward, and this is how we're going to do it. And if I feel strongly that the town board has done our job. Okay, what we've done is we've hired excellent, experienced engineers who have identified a plan to go forward with real numbers, with real figures, with real flows. And then what we've done is we've gone out and beat the bush to find funding. And so those are the 2 aspects to sewer, right? The infrastructure and the money to pay for it. So Our job is to collect that information, present it to the stakeholders, to those district members that are going to be paying for it, and say, here's what we've done. Here is what it is. People, look, is this going to make sense for you? Do you believe that Hyde Park has a future that you're willing to invest in and say, yeah, okay, I can make this work because I'm going to, instead of having an 18-room hotel, I'm going to build a 50-room hotel. That's how it's going to work, but that's going forward. You know, like the mention of Baker Gagne, and, you know, we had this plan, we had that plan. But the truth is, none of those plans actually happened, right? If they had happened, we wouldn't be sitting here today. So that's why, time to look forward, and I think that's really built into this plan, because it's talking about making it sustainable. It's talking about making it as affordable as possible. That's why we're looking at these various options. So again, bringing people in and asking for their input to say, yeah, this is worth going forward. That's where we are, and I think that's the job that we've done the homework now, and that's the next step is for the district members to do their homework and think, you know, can I support this project? And so, really talking to any of the commercial property owners, they all say sewer. So here we are.
And the stakeholders, if we go back to the beginning on how many meetings we've had, the stakeholders have been part of this process from day one. And not once have they put up a stop sign. You know, they want us to continue down this path so we can get to a vote. Is it feasible? Is it affordable? And this is the process that we're taking. And I'm really excited about where we're at this point and where we're going to be going. So.
Good. So. Questions? Additional questions? Yeah, come on up to the podium, Herb.
Yeah, it's just listening to all this. It just occurred to me, if I was a businessman in this district, instead of just looking at what the costs are, I want to be thinking about what is the sustainability of my business under the current circumstances. What is going to happen? How attractive is the area going to be? And will I still be in business in 10 years or 20 years if we don't do anything? And I think if we answer those questions, I think that's going to go a long way towards making a good decision.
You know, one of the things that we didn't spend a lot of time on, and when you guys have one of our big giant books.
You do?
So this is the draft. That's the draft that the supervisor has in her hand. It's a pretty fat thing. In there, because we thought everybody's eyes would glaze over, and Elizabeth can do all the little facts and figures, but we did a very detailed market analysis. We didn't, but we hired a specialist who does this. We did our team did a very detailed market analysis, and one of the things that really struck me is, I think it's called leakage, am I right? Leakage? Yeah, so leakage is where you have people who are in your area, but their economic activity doesn't happen there. It happens someplace else. So if you think about, and I don't remember the stats, in some place we had them, but how many people are between the two historic sites who drive through your community, never stop, don't buy a cup of coffee, don't have dinner, no place to stay? All of that money, all of that economy is gone. It goes other places. So as we talk about how does this system get paid for, gets paid for by having a system so that there can be things for people to pay for in your community. What does that do for you as a resident? The more you have folks come in from outside and spend their hard-earned dollars here, drop their cash and leave, the better off you are. That's ideal. It's the perfect situation. Elizabeth was saying something earlier about the traffic on 9, and she was sort of talking about slowing it down, and I think people are going, don't slow it down more, for God's sake, it's terrible, right? But that's part of it, is how do we create better access, how do we deal with that? But if you're gonna have to put up with that stuff, at least get their money, right? Get their money. I grew up in a community that was dying. And there, good, bad, or otherwise, was a substantial investment. It's now sort of wedding Mecca land, right? So that's, been our perspective, a little tiny village, 400 people. We now have, on a weekend, there'll be 10,000 people in the village, and you sort of go, but our taxes base is better. it's much more sustainable. It's a much better place to live. There's more things to do. There's more kids are staying rather than leaving. It's that kind of a thing. And has it been painful? Absolutely. And do I really hate all the traffic in front of my house? Without question. But it's one of these things where, we have to make these decisions. We can continue down the path, and then we're going to see more of that leakage. We're going to see more of those taxes go. That's part of this. So I think the supervisor's point's an excellent point. This is a very forward-looking situation. This is, yes, you have to think about today because I have to pay the bill today. But from to your point, the business owner, part of it is a cost avoided. Your septic system fails. I don't know, Brock, what's it cost to haul septic off? What does it cost to replace a septic system? You're into tons of money. And the septic guy's not a bank. He's not going to be nice to you. He's going to show up and say, pay me half my bill today, and when I'm finished, you pay the other half, and you better come up with the cash. With the sewer system, is it expensive? Yes. But can you plan for it? Absolutely. Because again, it doesn't sneak up on you. It takes a really long time. And does it become part of the fabric of the community? It's there, you rely on it. A lot of people here are on the public water system. It's reliable. It's there all the time. It may not be cheap, but it provides you with good quality drinking water. Y'all got to decide, is there going to be a day when you're not going to take showers and flush your toilets? That's great. If so, you don't need this infrastructure. But if you're gonna, then, it's kind of an inevitability, so.
I just wanted to mention in terms of that thick report here, all of this, I believe all of it, if we got it right, is on the website, hpdowntown.com. And you can go look at PDFs of all these draft documents if you want to wade into those finer details. And you can certainly contact us with questions, or there's a form right on the website for questions also.
But I think the market analysis in particular is very edifying.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see the data from your own community, so I recommend people take a look at that. And I think we just need to back it up just a minute, because we've talked about sewers so much that there's a lot of assumptions that we make that everyone understands, and I know from your presentation you might deduce it, but just so the public understands, it is only paid for by the people who are part of that district. It's not a town tax that's imposed on the general populace. And so, before people worry about, well, how's this going to impact my tax bill? Well, actually, it's a good question as to how this would impact your general tax bill for someone who lives on Quaker or Franklin, and I think that is one of the motivations that we have too, because if we can grow our commercial tax base, we anticipate that it will reduce some of the burden on the residences, and that is an important benefit to a sewer in this area. Even if you don't actually live within walking distance, it can have that benefit on your net tax liability, and that's another reason that we pursue it. And I know this factually because of talking with supervisors from other communities that have this type of infrastructure and dense development, and not necessarily that we strive to have a larger government, but we'd like to have a really top-notch, efficient government with the kind of staff that people would always have their needs answered. We have our wonderful highway super here, Howie Fisher's doing a bang-up job here in the town. Yay, Howie. But, we've had a lot of discussions since Howie's been in. It's like, we need to get to these roads, There's a lot of deferred maintenance in the town, and so that's how these pieces fit together, and that's why, back before I really got very heavily involved in town government, I was a little skeptical of the sewer thing. I was like, hey, I kind of like Hyde Park the way it is. And I remember talking with Jonathan about this because he's been with the Water Authority for a long time. And, it really took me a while to get the sewer bug. But to really see that it's something that if we don't do it, it limits Hyde Park's potential. And that's the other way I'm looking at it. Let's fully vet this, let's fully explore it, and hey, if it's not for the town, let's move on, let's find some other ways to make Hyde Park a fabulous place. But let's really drill down, decide if this is it, and if it is, go forward, and if it's not, let's stop talking about it, because it's tiresome to always have, oh, you know, if that sewer ferry would just drop this sewer in this town, we'd all be set. That's not a viable plan or approach. So I think that's why we you know, have committed so much time and energy to a planning project, and that we are eagerly embracing the next steps.
How
So-
about more comments?
Yeah, more comments. Sure, please.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Tori Kane. I live on Beat Art Place, and unfortunately, I don't think I'm in the expanded sewer district. But I don't have anything prepared, so pardon me if I sound a little disjointed. I appreciate your comments about who pays for it, because I've been on the town board, I've been on the zoning board, I've been on the planning board. I'm currently an alternate to the planning board. And when I was on the town board, I helped form one of the large water districts for the town before it was taken over by the county. And so I know about the benefit units part, and that can be really confusing. So I think it's important when people hear how expensive it'll be for commercial property, those costs, to know that those costs aren't necessarily equally divided, that if you have a smaller piece of property, you'll pay much less. And that, because that can be intimidating to hear
Absolutely.
those kinds of numbers. The other thing I really think, because I am a village resident, and I know it's gravel, and our septic systems generally work pretty well, and so I worry that it could be a hard sell, because it seems on the surface of it much cheaper to maintain your septic system. But I think it's important to look at it as an increase in property value and a decrease in general taxes, as you were talking about, if we have more businesses in town. When I first came to town over 27 years ago, I helped work on forming a water district in Statsburg with Bob Linville and Bob Clearwater. Thank you, guys, because I had babies and brown water. And I sold my house for exactly what I paid for it. And a few years later, the people who bought it just after the district was put in sold it for double. So those kinds of infrastructure changes make a huge difference. So when people are looking at what their potential bill is, I think they also need to look at that. The other thing that I've heard as a resident and as somebody who's functioned in government is, oh my God, Hyde Park is the land of gas stations and service stations, and why can't we do something different? Part of it, I think people need to recognize commercial property is private property, and so as long as it's within the zoning, those property owners can do what they want to do. But those are also the only businesses that really can come to Hyde Park until we have sewer, because they're not water-intensive businesses. This is something that I have wanted to happen in town for probably 25 of my 28 years in town. So every year I think, oh, please, let this be the year. I'm really excited. It's still a long haul. We've got a lot to do, but thank you.
Thank you, Tori.
Thank
Those
you.
are really good comments.
I'll be fast. Bob Linville, Statsburg. 10 years ago, I was one of the many people who spent a lot of time in the sewer issues.
Fun, isn't it?
And one of the things that I like hearing tonight is the focus on getting the input from both the commercial and the residential potential users, the benefit units that would pay for this. We came really close 10 years ago. We had the support of the users. We had the votes there. Things fell apart, as they have done in Hyde Park lots of times. This feels good. This feels like it's going to happen, and I can't commend you enough for all the work you've done. I know from firsthand you have a lot of work to do, but most important part of it, again, I think, is to talk to the potential customers of the service, the residential and commercial properties. If they're on board, this is going to happen. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Bob. Would anyone else like to comment?
Brent Pickett, Hyde Park, New York. want to take the discussion from below ground to above ground a little bit. If you look at what we have from Vanderbilt down to the CIA, to me, there's a lack of linkages, transportation, bicycle. If you ever try bicycle up and down Route 9, it's risky. And from a marketing point of view for the town, what can we do to try and draw all that together to link it, whether Uber or who knows, whatever.
Thanks, Brent.
Yeah, you know, and that's a great point. And I think that this is sort of the baby steps towards that. You know, in some of the, we have, if you go online, especially if you can't sleep, excellent exercise, go online, try to read the reports. But the Route 9 report's actually fairly succinct, but it has a lot of pictures, a lot of illustrations. And those are terrific for trying to envision what that corridor, that connected corridor would look like. Especially, Elizabeth mentioned the sharrows, which are those combined bike lane, driving lanes. We'd love to have a dedicated bike lane. There just isn't enough right-of-way. And it's competing for space for sidewalks. So, you know, it's kind of that blending of things. But this is the idea, is to create a much more cohesive corridor. We've all been to those places where you go, and you drive into town, and all of a sudden you're just like, this is cool. And you don't know why, and you're not identifying specifically, oh, that street light, or it's the fact that they have a sidewalk, or there's a cafe. But it's all of those things, and I think that's your point. All of those things together that make that sense of place that Elizabeth was talking about earlier. And again, I think to the highway uses that we've seen here, that's what can be supported by the land. And frankly, if you're a landowner and you want to make some money on your property because you're a commercial property owner, that's your thing. You got to go find somebody to come into that land. If you have a sewer system, now you're open to a whole world of potential uses. One of the things I think it's really important to know is there's a lot of visitors. My understanding is that there are a lot of potential events to go on at our kind of 3 big anchor institutions that either get turned away because there's nowhere to stay in a hotel, and some of them are staying in hotels very, very far away and being bussed in. They're staying here for numerous days to do different events. You could capture that here. And that, again, is back to that, what helps pay for this kind of stuff. Don't think about what you see sitting there today paying for this. That doesn't fly. In fact, Brock did a lot of math, a lot of really sophisticated math to demonstrate that it doesn't work. He came and said, this doesn't work. I said, I know, because you got to think about what will it be.
Which is one of the reasons why just the town center alone doesn't work. If that was built out, then it's on different now.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons why we're able to keep that as an option, just that piece.
So that's an excellent point. It's that idea of how do you create that. Yep, that connected corridor.
What we have between the 2 sites and what we plan to have between the 2 sites. Keep it linkable.
Right. And one of the things, if you get into the conceptual master plan, which remember is just a vision, but some of the things you see there is you do see a trolley stop, you do see a visitor center that maybe is, you know, someplace where there's a commercial kitchen so that the CIA can come up and do a pop-up, or a local local restaurant can do a pop-up restaurant there. Maybe kind of like the idea of you drive along the thruway and you see those New York State, you know, product things where it's like, here's the honey and here's the this and here's the that. That's kind of part of that concept, and you would have this network because you have the train station, you have Vanderbilt, you would have something at this site, again, to draw people there and get them into that environment and making those connections. So that's kind of, again, great big picture out there, but we've seen it happen in other places. You know, if the right infrastructure is there, and not just sewer infrastructure, but the zoning and the pedestrian improvements and those kinds of things, then that will be attractive for investment.
Okay, would anyone else like to take a moment and make a comment? Okay, so with that, I suggest that we adjourn this portion of the meeting, and just want to thank Delaware for an outstanding presentation, as well as all your dedicated work. It was really your pleasure to work with, and it's just the beginning, not the end. So I'm going to be taking a look at the calendar to identify our next meeting, which will be with the public pertaining to the sewer option. And at the moment, I'm thinking June 11th, but I just want to make sure that people are available. So again, thank you, and look forward to seeing the public at the next phases. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, well, we do still have a lot of exciting items on our agenda if everybody wants to stick around. All righty. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That was great, you guys. Really nice presentation. Okay, you guys ready? Let's go.
Yeah, we just have a few more minutes to go here, so let's
Yeah.
All right,
wrap it up.
let's wrap this thing up.
baby up.
Yeah, let's do it.
All righty, so Emily, do you want to go ahead and start?
We're just going to finish up the meeting, everybody.
Excuse me, guys, we just have to finish up our board meeting here. Thank you.
If anyone wants to talk, could you just go out in the hallway so we can finish this up?
Yep, we need to finish our meeting.
Thank you.
Resolution 571 of 2018, resolution authorizing the town supervisor to execute a contractual agreement with Nelson Pope and VOORHIS LLC to provide planning and zoning consulting services in conjunction with the NYSERDA Cleaner Greener Communities program to support redevelopment in the core Pinewoods commercial area of Route 9.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
That's going to have Bonnie Franzen come back to finish the zoning update for us.
Resolution 57-2 of 2018, resolution scheduling a public hearing on the 2017-18 MS4 permit annual report.
Second?
And all in favor?
Aye.
Woo, Tad.
Went through, Ted.
You are waiting with
Sweating
bated
that one.
breath.
Resolution 7-3 of 2018, resolution authorizing Nunc-Pro-Tunc Kathleen Davis, Hyde Park Recreation Director, to attend the United Way Not-for-Profit Leadership Summit on Monday, May 7th, 2018.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 57-4 of 2018, resolution accepting a donation from the Hyde Park Rotary Club for Hyde Park Recreation's 2018 Music in the Parks.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Resolution 575 of 2018, resolution authorizing the Town of Hyde Park supervisor to execute a street lighting authorization order with Central Hudson Gas and Electric Corporation for a street light at 10 Doty Avenue in the Town of Hyde Park.
Gladly second that.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 57-6 of 2018, resolution approving budget revisions to the town of Hyde Park for the period of April 2018, budget revisions number 2018-04.
Second?
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 7-7 of 2018, resolution authorizing the town clerk and highway superintendent to solicit blacktop bids for the 2018 road construction season.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
As I think I mentioned, I did talk to the comptroller about coming up with a more sustainable system for funding the paving going
Yeah.
forward. So I look forward to working on that more at budget time. But in the meantime, does someone want to read off what the roads are that are on the docket?
Would love to.
Yeah.
So the roads that will be done will be Horns Park Road, Baker Road, Horns Park North and South, Molly's Way, Cedar Lane, Doty Avenue, Fall Kill Road, Vista Road, Henry Street, and Rockland Road. And thank you again, Mr. Fisher.
And all in favor?
Aye. Resolution 57-8 of 2018, resolution amending the town user fees and escrow deposit schedules for solar facility application.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
I think we have, what, 5 or 6 solar facilities
Yeah, I think
before the
5,
planning board
yeah.
now? Yeah, I
Yeah.
think another one was coming in, so it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I think we created a law that allowed that.
We did,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what happened.
Early
Right,
on.
no, it's good. Resolution 579 of 2018, resolution authorizing the scheduling of a public hearing on local law B of 2018 entitled "A Local Law Changing the Meeting Date of the Town of Hyde Park Board of Assessment Review."
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Warren, do you want to just briefly?
Well, that's just retroactive to the last meeting. Apparently, none of us realized discussed, had a first, introduction and a second on the motion, but we may not have had a vote. So this is just correcting that deficiency, making tonight's public hearing totally legal.
Perfect.
Resolution 57-10 of 2018, resolution adopting local law number 2 of 2018 entitled a local law changing the meeting date
Wait,
of the...
that's, just do that.
You did that?
No, that's the
No,
scheduling.
this is
of the-
actually
sorry.
doing it, yeah.
Oh, sorry,
We'll
Dave.
do it again. Resolution 57-10 of 2018, resolution adopting local law number 2 of 2018 entitled a local law changing the meeting date of the Town of Hyde Park Board of Assessment Review.
Second?
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You should-
Oh, a roll call, okay. Please go ahead.
Councilwoman Svensson.
Aye.
Councilman Ray.
Aye.
Councilman Marine.
Aye.
Councilman Schneider.
Aye.
And Supervisor Rohr.
Aye,
We should just announce the date so everybody knows.
yes. The date is, the grievance day is now May 30th.
Friday.
Is it
Friday?
It's a Tuesday.
No, it's
No, it was the
Fourth Wednesday, isn't it?
oh, wait a second. What did we change it to?
After the
It's-
second,
The second Wednesday, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Second Wednesday
it's-
following
it's-
the fourth Tuesday.
Tuesday in May.
It's May
Second
30th.
Wednesday.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was the Tuesday after Memorial Day, my bad.
So just make sure everybody has it straight.
I'm with Bob Clearwater, let's just keep that date the same.
Oh, it is Wednesday, yeah.
It's Wednesday.
After the fourth Tuesday.
What day did you have? May what, 30th?
What was that?
30th of May, you said?
That's what you said.
So you're
Wednesday. It's a Wednesday.
Second
What
Wednesday.
date, what date is that?
Isn't it May 30th then?
It's a
the
Wednesday.
fourth Tuesday.
That's the
right?
day.
1, 2, 3, fourth Tuesday. It's the
Second Wednesday after the fourth Tuesday.
So it's the 30th.
Yeah.
So what
You had it
what is
right
the
the first
date,
time.
though? Just-
May 30th,
May
May 30th.
2018.
May 30th.
Wednesday. Concur, Peter?
All righty.
And actually, as long as we're on this topic, I just want to let the public know, once again, that our assessor resigned rather abruptly. Our people should call town hall to find out when the assessor's office will be open. We're actively looking for a replacement, but, just asking people to be patient during this interim period. We have an assessor, Chris Borek, that we appointed for 3 months. He is working nights. He is available by email. There is a phone number where people can leave a message and he gets back to you. So we know it's not ideal, but it's the best that we can do at this moment in time. So, but be assured that you will have your phone calls returned.
And if anybody knows an assessor, they
Yeah,
can contact
send
town
him,
hall.
send him
and-
on my way.
Okay, Resolution 57-11 of 2018, resolution appointing temporary seasonal laborer for the Town of Hyde Park Recreation Department.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye. Resolution 57-12 of 2018, resolution authorizing non-protunct the reinstatement of the municipal secretary in the building department to 35 hours per week.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 5713 of 2018, resolution authorizing the town supervisor to execute a memorandum of understanding among the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority, the Town of Hyde Park, and T-Rex Hyde Park Owner LLC with regard to the Phase 1 wastewater system improvements for the Bellafield Plan Development District project.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And last one, Resolution 57-14 of 2018, resolution acknowledging receipt of request to establish an open development area for Subphase 1-A ST for St. Andrews PUD, referring the matter to the Planning Board for its input and advice in accordance with provisions of Section 280-A4 of the town law.
Second?
And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Doesn't look like we have anyone to give us any public comment.
Howie?
Howie? No?
Come on.
You good? You all good? Okay. So we have our townwide tag sale coming up, not this weekend, but the following. And I'd like to wish all the mothers out there a very happy Mother's Day this coming weekend. And that's it. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Howie. Thanks, Tad. Thanks, Donna.
Yeah.
Now I like it's harder for me to leave it behind. I'm so.
Turn, you're in, yeah.
Heavy in my pocket.